A cool thing that a lot of RPGs have, from my experience, is battles with characters who've joined your party or are going to join your party. I won't say what games because spoilers, but what I will ask is, will this happen in Deltarune? So today, we're going to be looking at every character who's part of the Fun Gang and seeing what the likelihood of having a battle with them is. We'll be talking about Chris, Susie, and Rouse, as well as throwing Lancer and Noelle in there as a bonus. Since Lancer is part of the Fun Gang, but has a less interesting answer to the question, and while Noelle isn't a member of the Fun Gang, she's been a party member, so she counts. We'll be covering the likelihood in both routes currently available in the game, because the answers may be different, and the circumstances will definitely be different. So, why not start with the first hero and the leader, Chris. Chris gives me the chance to set a precedent that you'll see in this video. You see, I ran a few polls to gauge the community's opinion on this topic, or at least my community, and without fail, every single poll I made got the comment "we already did" when discussing if we'll fight a specific character. The next statement may seem obvious to some, but I'm gonna say it anyway just to make it clear. Just because something happens once doesn't mean it can't happen again. Many people point to the Chris battle in chapter 4, where we have to try and navigate our way to a guitar. First of all, this isn't really a battle so much as it's a mini game. And secondly, let's take a look at our favourite blue bird who appears in chapter 2. Snowy! I'm joking, it's obviously Birdly. We fight Bradley a minimum of 2 times in each route. 3 if you count the Queen battle. That's 4 unique battles in one chapter for one character, all of which happen under different circumstances. The roller coaster battle, the normal route alleyway fight with Noelle, the weird route alleyway fight with Noelle, and the Queen battle. So if it wasn't clear enough, things can happen multiple times, and that precedent has been set in Deltarune. So, moving on to Chris. I think we can all agree there's only one circumstance in the normal route that would let us battle against Chris, and that's us getting the vessel back from the start of the game. And a lot of people seem confident that we'll get the vessel back due to the fact that the data of the vessel is saved after chapter 1, when it very easily could have been forgotten between games. I'm gonna give my own personal opinion on this, and that is simply that this isn't guaranteed. I understand that it's saved within the code, but due to past incidents, Toby is very much aware that we're looking through the code. For those who don't know, when Undertale released, there was a message at the top of the files titled abc_123_a.ogg, which in the original release of the game sounded like this.
Hello, have some respect and don't spoil the game.
It's impossible to have mysteries nowadays.
Because of nosy people like you.
Please keep all of this between us.
If you post it online, I won't make any more secrets.
No one will be impressed.
It will be your fault.
After update 1.001, the file was changed to sound like this. This is because the warning stopped no one and the secret code information got posted online. Toby seems to have changed his tune regarding this due to the unused text in Deltarune, which, if you're curious what that is, I have a short showcasing all of it linked in the cards. Either way, he's aware that we're looking in the code, so he isn't going to put major plot spoilers in the code. Nothing is obvious just because we have information from there. If the vessel wasn't present, we'd know that it wouldn't be coming back. Because it is, we can guess whether it will or won't. Unlike a certain other theory that I hate, I will at least concede that the vessel could possibly show up at some point in later chapters, and we may eventually take control of them. In that instance, I think a battle with Chris is almost inevitable. I think 2 circumstances for that fight are possible. Either we get what most people are expecting, which is Chris no longer needing us and finally having a punching bag to take out their anger on, or what I think could happen, which is we enter our vessel against Chris's will, causing them to suffer immense physical pain from our absence, and having a desperation fight where Chris fights as just to cling on to life. We've already seen Chris struggle without us, with their staggered walking in chapter 1 and 2, as well as how they get pretty tired when attacking us in this section in chapter 4. Without the vessel, I can pretty safely say that a Chris boss battle is nigh on impossible. We may get more chase sequences or minigames like in chapter 4, but an actual battle against them in the regular battle style would be pushing it. There's no characters who fit the bill of the future vessel for us to control. At least, not in the normal route. I think a Weird Root Chris battle is almost nailed on at this point. They clearly have a valid reason to hate us, and there's already theories regarding a growing soul inside of Noelle that we can control. So if those are true, it just becomes a matter of time. But we have to look at the possibility of us being wrong, given that's been a common theme of a lot of Deltarune theories regarding the future of the game. So if we don't take control of Noelle, will we still have a battle with Chris? Well, once again, it depends on if we take control of the original vessel again. And I've already given my opinion on that. But I will add that it's so far a pretty reasonable assumption that things that happen in the normal route will happen in the weird route, since most things are the same between routes. If anything, I feel like if we don't take control of Noelle, Chris will probably be the one to end us in a self-sacrifice scenario. We've already seen that Chris is willing to put their life on the line, or at the very least, their own safety on the line, in order to protect those they care about. Is it too unreasonable to suggest that Chris may see a way to end everyone's suffering and take it? Hey, you've watched pretty far into the video. Why not consider subscribing? Most of my viewers aren't subscribed, and most return to watch more of my videos. I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of June, so any support towards that goal would be much appreciated. Moving on to Susie, and she's an easy yes in both routes. But I'll start by explaining the normal route, since that's the one I feel is hard to sell to some people. So we all know that Chris is working with the knight. It's pretty much confirmed with the reduced damage they do in the fight, this scene where they kneel to them, the fact that if you make it to the knight in this part in chapter 4, Chris just does nothing to the knight, and that's not even including the phone calls at Noelle's house, although those may have just been to Carol. Another thing we all accept is that Susie struggles to make friends with people. Most people are intimidated by her or just see her as weird. If she ever did make a friend, she'd later discover that someone had done so as a joke, or she'd end up moving away and losing that friend. For now, let's put those facts aside to discuss a possible theory, which is the fact that a lot of things that happen in the Dark World are possibly hinting at future things that will happen in Deltarune, or giving us more of an insight into certain Light World characters. Take Queen for example. She seems to be a representation of everyone's mother figure, and treats everyone in the way that their mother would treat them. Ralsei doesn't have a mother, so long as you don't believe certain theories, and how Queen treats Ralsei fits in line with that. She often forgets he's there, only responding when he says something, and not even having a fifth cage or a room available for him. She doesn't even remember him when it comes to the Gear Queen fight. Bradley is treated neglectfully by Queen, so we can assume the same is true for his mother. We never see her, and even when he's in the hospital with a broken arm or ice running through his body, which would be a perfect time to introduce her, she's not there. There's also the fact that Bradley is always at the library, to the point where they depend on him for volunteering. It's not impossible to think that he volunteers at the library just to avoid her. Then there's Noelle, who's focused on a lot by Queen, with Queen demanding her way with Noelle in a similar way to how Carol does it, although Queen is a lot more humorous. There's also the fact that Noelle's room in Queen's mansion is away from everyone else's, almost like she's trying to keep her safe from potential dangers. The same could be argued for Carol, with Noelle's house being far away from most other houses in Hometown, and the fact it's the only house in the game that is fenced off. Even the Dreamer household, which is most likely the second biggest house in Hometown, isn't fenced off. It's like the entire place was built just to keep Noelle safe. Moving on to Chris, and we see Queen being a lot more directly caring and appreciative of Chris, reflecting how Toriel is openly caring of Chris, even if it's overbearing, like holding their hand and rubbing their face. Oh, and there's also the drinking thing, which has been covered to death, and I don't think I need to go into more detail on that similarity. With Susie, Queen is more, I guess you'd say, argumentative. The two constantly get into verbal fights, and Susie is very aggressive towards her, implying a violent home situation, something a lot of theorists have already agreed upon before chapter 3 was released, and a belief that chapter 4 has only really amplified. But that's just one example of a character being similar to Lightner's. Surely that doesn't apply to other characters, right? Well, a couple of secret bosses have something to say about that. Spamton Neo is constantly tied down by strings and a lot of pressures from higher powers. Similar to how Chris is often tied down by a lot of things, whether that be the Knight and their gang, or us controlling every action they make. And Jevil is a character who believes they are free, but are very limited in what they can do. Almost like a lot of players who believe they are free, yet everything in the game happens virtually the same anyway. The player is not a free entity with loads of control, and believing that they are is setting yourself up for some very stinky takes. No, this isn't a dig at a popular theorist. Why would I do that? That was a bit long, but it was necessary to explain those things clearly, so we were all on the same page about Chris's alliance with the Knight, Susie's friend troubles, and the Dark World reflecting future events in the Light World. Now, we can talk about Lancer. Trust me, this is getting to the question. So if we look at Lancer in Chapter 1, analyze his relationship with Susie, we see that the two of them start off in a pretty violent place, with Susie grabbing Lancer and threatening to bite his face off. Then the two of them team up and become good friends, only for Susie to learn that Lancer betrayed them in her eyes, fight Lancer, and finally, they both calm down and agree to take out the big bad, that being King. Now let's look at Chris and Susie's relationship. It mostly starts with Susie grabbing Chris and threatening to bite their face off, then eventually becoming good friends with them. So far, at the halfway point of the story, everything seems to match Lancer. If we compare Lancer and Chris, we see that Lancer locks everyone up, not because he's a traitor and wants to hurt Susie, but because he wanted his own selfish interest to be prioritized, that being that neither Susie or his dad get hurt. If we analyze Chris as a character, we can see that their friendship with Susie is important to them, and any acts they take with the knight is purely to further their own selfish goal of whatever the knight's end goal is, which is probably something other than the roaring, but would require the roaring to happen to be achieved. If we look at all of these similarities, I think it's pretty safe to say that Lancer's character arc in Chapter 1 is foreshadowing for the entirety of Chris and Susie's relationship throughout the entire game. And if we believe that, then it's pretty obvious that Susie will battle us in future Deltarune chapters at some point. As for the Weirder, I think it's pretty safe to say it will happen. All it would take is Susie finding out what we did to Noelle for us to get into a fight with her, whether we're controlling Chris, Noelle, or the vessel. There's no real theories I even have to explain this one. I would just genuinely be surprised if we never battle Susie in the weird route. Ralsei is a lot harder to explain in this regard, since I feel we don't know enough about him yet, and I feel like that's intentional. For those of you who got into Deltarune after the release of chapters 3 and 4, you may not necessarily be aware that Deltarune was intended to release chapters 3, 4, and 5 simultaneously, but because of delays and restructures regarding chapter 3, the game was released with just 3 and 4. You might also be unaware that Deltarune was meant to release as one package from chapter 2 to the end of the game, but that's not important for this discussion. What is important is what each chapter focuses on. Chapters 1 and 2 feel as if they are an introduction to the world of Deltarune and how a lot of things work, namely the differences between the light and dark world. Chapter 3 and 4 feel more like individual deep dives into each member of the Fun Gang. Chapter 3 is heavily focused on Chris, more than any other chapter in the game, with the Dark World being made by them and everything about it connecting to them specifically, as well as meeting the Roaring Knight, who Chris is also working for. When you get this chapter's Shadow Crystal, you also get the best weapon for Chris in the form of the Black Shard. Chapter 4 has a deeper focus on Susie, with a lot of her background being explored, such as when she smashed a piano. Gerson's teachings feel very focused towards Susie, and the whole chapter just seems to spotlight her more. In fact, beating Gerson rewards you with Susie's best weapon, and her magic stat increases by 4 from doing this. Naturally, it would follow that chapter 5 will mostly focus on Ralsei, which seems weird with all the hints that this chapter will revolve around Asgore, but I don't think it's impossible for Ralsei to be a big focus in this chapter too. Despite the fact that I feel ill-equipped to answer this question, given the limited information we have, I'm going to try anyway. I think the likely answer to if we are going to be required to fight him is no. But if it is yes, I feel like it'll be one of two places, although technically both are possible. The first scenario where we could fight him is as the final Shadow Crystal boss. I've spoken before about how I think it will be revealed in chapter 5 that Ralsei is the last Shadow Crystal holder, and it will explain how he knows so much, like the layout of the school, and how he learned about the prophecy. I've always just assumed that Ralsei would battle against someone else in chapter 5, but I've recently been toying with the idea that we could fight as Chris and Susie against Ralsei as a way for him to test our skills. I think this would be an interesting way to have us battle Ralsei and elevate his character, even if it's optional. I don't think Ralsei would get involved in a battle between Susie and Chris, assuming my prediction for that is true. I can't see him fighting against Chris at any point, and he'd only fight against Susie if he's also part of the Night Shelter Wi-Fi Club, something I don't think is true. And this is gonna sound insane, but I don't think we can rule out the possibility of Ralsei being the final boss. It'll be on a level similar to either Azrael or Omega Flowey, and probably would be treading old ground, but honestly, I still see it as slightly possible. I will say that these are the only battles I see as possible for Ralsei in the normal route. Either he's optional, the final boss, or nothing at all. I really can't see a Ralsei battle in the main story being something we recover from narrative-wise. As for the weird route, I'm going to assume that if I'm right about the Shadow Crystal prediction, then we'll fight him there in both routes. But if I'm wrong about that, then I still think we'll get a battle against Ralsei. Ralsei seems to know about us doing the weird route since he has a different reaction to when we say we want to bring Noelle to the festival, based on whether we've done the route or not. So I imagine he will know when we've gone too far and can't turn back, and will fight us as soon as he possibly can to try and stop us. I feel like we'd get a Ralsei weird route battle separate from the Susie weird route battle, due to how much Ralsei cares for his friends. He wouldn't want to burden Susie with having to fight one of her friends, or something that looks like one of her friends. If we're getting a weird route battle, then it'll be separate. Moving on to Lancer, and yeah, I'm mainly covering him here because he is technically a member of the Fun Gang, and I'd get questions if I didn't cover him. But the answer is no. Lancer's character arc is done, and regardless of the route, he won't pose much of a threat to us, especially not in the weird route. There's just no way we'd fight him outside of a dojo rematch or whatever. Inside the main story, it's not gonna happen. Finally, we finish with Noelle. Could we fight Noelle in the normal route? I mean, it's not entirely impossible. There's many theories regarding the knight's identity, but the most popular is that the knight is either Des, Carol, or Rudy. Personally, I think it's Rudy, but that's not relevant for this video. What is relevant is the fact that all of these characters are family members of Noelle. There's a chance that the knight could convince Noelle that the Fun Gang are the harmful side of this party, pinning most of their actions on Chris, with enough truth to it that no one can deny what they're saying. I think Noelle could be swayed to fight us in that context. That, or she's used the puppet to fight us against her own will, which terrifies me. Don't think I'd be used to being on the other end of a snow grave. As for the weird route, there's only one way I see a Noelle boss battle happening on the weird route, and that's if, as a last way out of the weird route, we're tasked with destroying our creation. I imagine this would end the weird route if we were violent to Noelle, but we'd be fully locked in if we used pacifism to beat her. The weird route isn't about being majorly violent towards everyone. Manipulation is at the core of the route, so this is why I think this. But in all likelihood, we won't get a Noelle boss fight, since we'll likely be able to play as Noelle in the weird route. Thanks for watching this long. YouTube thinks you'll like the video on screen, so why not see if they're right?